The Saudi Council of Senior Scholars, the official religious institution in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, issued a statement in strong language, in which it warned against the core of terrorism that is attached to the Islamic religion. The Commission said, "The Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist group and does not represent the approach of Islam, but rather pursues its partisan goals that are contrary to the guidance of our true religion." Cover up with religion. And she continued, "Since the establishment of this group, there has been no interest in it for the Islamic faith, nor for the sciences of the Quran and Sunnah. Rather, its goal is to reach power, and then the history of this group was full of evils and strife, and from its mercy emerged extremist terrorist groups that ravaged the country and the people, corrupt from what is known and seen from violent crimes and terrorism around the world." Then she concluded, "From the above, it becomes clear that the Brotherhood is a terrorist group that does not represent the approach of Islam, but rather pursues its partisan goals that contradict the guidance of our true religion. It conceals religion and practices what contradicts it in terms of division and stirring up discord, violence, and terrorism. Everyone should beware of this group and not belong to it or sympathize with it." 25 years have passed since the first terrorist operation against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, when 4 terrorists targeted a site in the Al Olaya neighborhood in the capital, Riyadh, inhabited by foreigners of several nationalities, on November 13, 1995. This event was a major turning point, and it was also an investigation to investigate the causes, and whether the security forces had speeded up the pace of arresting them. Bearing in mind that they were features indicating that the infiltrators of terrorist ideology came from the womb of extremist speeches and the terrorist Al-Qaeda organization. In that event, and after only 5 months, the perpetrators were arrested, who are 4 young Saudi men, ranging in age from 24 to 28, whose confessions were televised, and the Saudis received them with a sense of surprise. They have not witnessed anything like that before, although the Juhayman incident in 1979 is still among the historical narratives that they thought were closed. As for the 4 young men, it was proven according to the investigations that announced that they had received their training in Afghanistan, had their relations with the leader of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, and obtained weapons through smuggling from Yemen. The deceived 4 received the dominant discourse during the Afghan War, and what was before it in terms of speeches that affected the educational curricula, and when the waves of black speeches were present through groups that exploited the religious as well as educational institutions for mobilization and promotion. And from the politicized religious discourse through several personalities and symbols, some of whom have taken to the pulpits of the mosques, their armed violence was derived from the books of the Brotherhood organization and the Suraria wing, which found its presence in Saudi Arabia to be fuel for fire, and this includes other details. The first terrorist event, in 1995, was followed by events in which Al-Qaeda was the first adopter, and carried out by individuals who were recruited through ideological rhetoric, especially in the post-9/11 era. Hence, Saudi Arabia has witnessed, in successive periods since 2003 and 2004, devastating terrorist incidents, in which dozens of civilians were killed, in addition to dozens of security personnel. However, the security forces began writing chapters on the end of the Al-Qaeda organization in Saudi Arabia, and completed the process of ending its presence. The Sharia judiciary also wrote final lines in 2016, after several rulings were convicted, which became final dozens of them, whether from the military side or the media side, as well as the few who worked on the legal or theoretical side. And what resulted from that era is that it prevails over the various triple hierarchical extremist currents, military, legal and media, whose hatred often adapts to each other, and is even marred by many disagreements, perhaps in detailing these stories and narration. But the ideological discourse remained the realm of transformations for all members of the organizations, despite the question, is there a source that can be dried and blocked to stop speeches that try to harm the political body of the state, or try to filter societies with poisonous ideas? Smashing a 40-year project. In fact, the Al Olaya neighborhood operation in Riyadh in 1995 did not come about by chance. Rather, it was certain that it was the product of an ideological project, and what preceded the events and the rise of dynamic clerics in the discourses of what was called the Awakening. This is confirmed by Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince. Within 1 year, we were able to put an end to an ideological project that had been made for 40 years, he said in statements carried by the Saudi press agency last week. Today, extremism is no longer accepted in the kingdom, and it no longer appears on the surface. Rather, it has become rejected, disguised, and alienated. However, we will continue to face any extremist appearances, behaviors, and ideas. The Saudis have proven their true tolerance and their rejection of these ideas that were alien to them from outside parties that covered the cloak of religion, and will never allow it to exist among them again. Prince Mohammed explained, the phenomenon of extremism was widespread among us. We have reached a point where we aim, at best, to coexist with this scourge. Eliminating it was not an option. Control over it is not possible. He added, I made promises in 2017 to eradicate extremism immediately, and we have actually started a serious campaign to address the causes and address the phenomena. Prince Mohammed bin Salman then affirmed that hate speech is the main motivation for recruiting extremists, including hate speech that uses freedom of expression and human rights as a justification, noting that this speech attracts hate speech against extremists, and it is rejected, of course. This statement is the largest by a Saudi official, who shed light on the main points in the face of an ideological discourse, escalating religious stars of window who were with inclinations opposing the integrative relationship between religion and the Saudi state known from its founding. Organizations were formed. In 2014, Saudi Arabia classified in its political entity the Brotherhood a terrorist group, which is a group that tried to bring about social change in order to influence political influence, but all the products were filled with pain from clerics who followed their movement, or from taking another wave that stems from the same brotherhood ideology. In fact, Saudi Arabia was far from all politicized religious attempts. Rather, the state, with its political entity, faced these thresholds, achieved its success, and that entity remained strong. Perhaps the most famous position of the attempts at polarization was when King Abdulaziz, the founding king of the Saudi entity, confronted him in a meeting with Hassan al-Banna, founder of the Brotherhood, when al-Banna asked him to open a branch of the Brotherhood in the kingdom, and at that time the king replied, "We are all brothers and Muslims." After that, the Brotherhood's attempts to establish an entity for them did not stop, but they did not find an institutional foothold. Rather, they formed symbols for the purposes of recruitment according to their constitution, and their books prove that, and with it the evidence of history. A number of followers of the Brotherhood symbols infiltrated the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia in the late 1950s and during the 1960s, after confronting former Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser and trying to assassinate him in the Manshaya incident, 1954. During that period, they tried to show false loyalty, and the field of education was their place of entry. Indeed, many of them were able to highlight their presence in front of a centrist approach that Saudi Arabia followed, and then their presence increased by their infiltration into Saudi Arabia also with the start of the Second Gulf War and the Saddam Hussein regime's invasion of Kuwait. And at that time, they took a missionary approach based on the approach of governance, atonement, and hatred, before the journey of destroying their presence and their tools that the political leadership in the kingdom finally brought about. The founder of the Brotherhood organization, Hassan al-Banna, had classified Muslims based on their position on the Brotherhood, and he mentioned this in detail about this movement in James Hayworth Dunn's book, British Intelligence, in his book Religious and Political Trends in Modern Egypt, which was published by Dar Yadal. As the book stated, al-Banna believes that the Brotherhood is the Islamic nation. The believer is a member of the Brotherhood, and whoever hesitates to accept the Brotherhood's principles is advised to monitor the movement's progress, study its writings, and be called hesitant. Al-Banna did not have to offer to the utilitarian except hard work and sacrifice, while the prejudiced enemy against the Brotherhood returns his matter to Allah's mercy and guidance. Hworth Dunn's book, author 70 years ago, is one of the books the Brotherhood denies after revealing many of their trends. The writer, who lived with Hassan al-Banna, was accustomed to his political principles, including his name General Guide, as well as to the necessity of organizing lectures on Islam to promote the cause of the Brotherhood. He also referred to the duty of each branch to have offices that represent the issue and where all members can meet. He also referred to the definition of Muslim Brotherhood by Hassan al-Banna to show the extent to which he was calling for a repeat of the experiences of prophethood. So using the word nation, the most important thing is not the state. On the other hand, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, during his visit to the United States in March of 2018, spoke with the prestigious American magazine Time, describing the followers of al-Surariya as the most extreme in the Middle East, and they are the highest degree. From the Muslim Brotherhood, he said, adding that the Syrians are criminals under our laws, and they will be tried whenever there is sufficient evidence against them. This is the same Saudi confrontation that was with the symbols of the Brotherhood, but in a stronger way. The Syrian movement found a polarization in the former Saudi society, after it was brought to Saudi Arabia by the Syrian cleric Muhammad Surar bin Naif Zain al-Abidin, and it combined Salafism, to satisfy the official orientation of the state in Saudi Arabia, with the ideology of the Brotherhood based on the politicization of religion. For your information, the men of the awakening, in most of them inside the kingdom, belong to this movement. Consequently, with the emergence of the awakening movement that exploited the pleasure wave, the Brotherhood found their golden opportunity. Indeed, they made al-Surariya their Trojan horse, with the aim of keeping the eyes away from their activities and exploiting Salafism as a show and a cloak, as a prelude to gaining control of official institutions, noting that this coincided with the rise of the Iranian, Khomeinist, revolution. Later, countries sponsoring the Brotherhood found a gold mine in Sururiya, so they persuaded them and strengthened their stardom, highlighting them in media outlets, from which they gave fatwas while outside the official religious establishment, and began to present a speech that entered the fabric of society. And after the Arab uprisings, most of the symbols turned to Turkey, and their methods of mobilization generated an attraction to the countries of revolutions. Saudi Arabia, for its part, ended al-Surariya, and some of them returned and appeared on television to disown. On the other hand, Saudi Minister of Islamic Affairs, Advocacy, and Guidance, Dr. Abdul Latif al-Sheikh, said on Twitter, "The non-Muslim Brotherhood practices horrific terrorism against anyone who warns of their danger or reveals their approach and exposes it. he added, the most dangerous and evil of their Syrian factions, and they form a deep government in the countries that are cursing them, and they spread in the joints of countries and suppress, but rather destroy everyone who exposes them or is exposed to them. Their weapons are lies, forgery, treachery, disguise and not fearing God. Immunization of Saudi education. The Brotherhood, and with them al-Surariya, was keen to penetrate Saudi Arabia. However, their effort was shattered, and the directions they tried to exercise were revealed, and with it all their plans. With the fall of their rule in Egypt, the ground that they tried to build on through education, and to convert it from cognitive to kinetic in Saudi Arabia, became a mirage, as a result of decisions and reforms in the educational system. During the past 2 years, the Imam Muhammad bin Saud Islamic University in Riyadh announced that it would not renew some Saudi and non-Saudi contractors who are affected by Brotherhood ideas, ISIS, and others. Likewise, a decision was issued by the Minister of Education in 2016, to withdraw about 80 books from libraries and learning resource centers in schools, including the book The Ten Commandments by Hassan al-Banna, and Suspicions About Islam and In the Shadows of the Quran by Said Qutb. Also, among the decisions was the decision of the current Minister of Education, Hamid al-Sheikh, to deport teachers who had committed intellectual offenses. The decision came from the Minister of Education himself, who granted education directors the right to immediately remove school workers who have intellectual violations and assign them to administrative work outside schools on a temporary basis, until the case is decided.